the Diatone GTR ready to fly. I actually have no idea what the name is. I'm going to show you this first. This is the HGLRC, the new stack that they're coming out with. This is the prototype version. This is a 60 amp 4-in-1. And it's using these tiny little FETs. And it says right there, Dyno Shot 60 amp. HGLRC has their own HGLRC kind of has their own numbering scheme, I guess. They might be going the way of batteries and C ratings, although the 40 amp 20 by 20 4-in-1 actually does work pretty well, and I know people that have been using it on full-size things, although it is a very hit-or-miss setup, and the HGLRC stacks in general are very hit-or-miss. This particular one has, it's going to have rubber inserts for the mounting, so it's nice that it's mounted. They like doing this little pin interconnect, which I think is really dumb because there have been a number of interconnect flight controller 4-in-1s that have these, and they just crack off when you hit something hard. But thankfully they did put this other connector on it. It's coming. Yeah, I'm not going to build it. I think I'm just going to give it to one of the Pyro pilots and have them build it. Okay, so the Diatone. All right, so this frame might look very familiar to you guys. It might look familiar because it pretty much is a copy of the Floss 2, and I have the most recent version of the Floss 2 here. But before I talk about that, I'm going to talk about the quad itself and the ready-to-flyness of this quad. So this is a quad coming from Diatone very soon. It's not out yet. They're planning on selling it for $220. At least that's what they told me. And yeah, let's discuss it. So it's using, when I first picked it up and I first opened the box, I'm like, oh my God, where's the ESCs? I haven't used individual ESCs for so long that I forgot that they exist. But these are the newest ESCs that they have made, and I know that there's a couple of skinny ESCs coming out soon. I think that new pilots like having individual ESCs because they feel like it's less of an issue, and if one burns out, you can just replace it. And people that are more experienced just prefer the 4-in-1s because they're just so much simpler and easier and save you so much darn time. And when you do break an arm, or you don't have the chance of props hitting the ESCs and breaking stuff. So I only use 4-in-1s or all-in-1s. I don't use individual ESCs. But if you do want individual ESCs, these ones are coming, and there's more that are skinny that are coming. Although these ones have this aluminum top plate, which I think they put on probably more so to protect the ESC from prop strikes rather than to dissipate heat, because when the ESC is right underneath the prop, it's getting so much air that it's really dissipating pretty nicely. But this is what I want to show you. So if you look at the top plate, it's awfully close to those caps over there, and if this bends down and touches those caps, it's going to short and it's going to fry the ESC. So I think a prop strike might actually bend that. I was a little bit, I would be a little bit worried about that. The flight controller is there all-in-one. It's actually kind of nice that it has a seat for the Unify, and it does have a full TBS Unify in there. Diatone does this thing where they actually use some real stuff, not all real stuff, but some real stuff, which is very nice. It is unfortunately an F3 flight controller, which flies fine, but I really don't see a point to an F3 flight controller when the F4s are the same, pretty much the same price, and they do give you slightly better performance. So yeah, it's okay. The flight controller is fine. ESCs are fine. The motors are something actually very special, and let me see if I can find one that doesn't have it covered here. So the motors are actually from Sunny Sky. You can see the end of the Sunny Sky name over there. These motors are the same as this motor here, and I haven't built a quad with these motors yet, and so I'm kind of like appreciative that somebody sent me a quad with the same motor on there so that I could test it easier. This is the Sunny Sky 2306 2700 kV. This is the 2450 kV version, and you can probably tell that the casing has changed, and Diatone probably said that we wanted the casing like this, which has the naked bottom and a nice thick base so that you won't break the bottom kind of base mount. And it has silver windings, which I'm not so sure actually do anything. And it's down to 2450 kV. With these props, which the props don't come with the quad. With these props, the performance is really stellar. These props are freaking awesome race props. They are so fast. They're actually pretty darn efficient. They're just really, really good props. And the combination of this motor and this prop, this motor is a great quality motor. It goes right up to the top of my list of my top 5 favorite motors. And along with these props, it's a great drivetrain. And like I've said before, nowadays, if you're spending at least $18 on a 5-inch motor, you're going to get a top quality motor, a top performing motor. There are some motors less than that are an excellent value and still good. The DYS $10 motor is the lowest I would go, and that still performs pretty darn good. The BBB 2207 2650 kV is my personal favorite value motor at $15, and RCX also has a couple of value options. Those are my best value recommendations based on all the motors I've tested in the past as well. RCX has been very well known for very good low-cost value motors. So, getting back to the quad, the biggest issue with this quad is the unfortunate FPV camera, which is just atrocious. It's just horrible camera, and it came with this just terrible lens, which I told them, I'm like, why is your camera such, why don't you just use an arrow, like a micro arrow? This is a camera that they make themselves, and it is a Sony 600 CCD, but they put this trashy lens on it, which turns it into a tiny whoop camera. So I immediately took that off, and I put a micro arrow lens on it, which thankfully fit. But unfortunately, the micro arrow lens doesn't have the filter on it. It doesn't have the IR filter. And then when I flew it, I realized that even though it says it's a Sony 600 CCD, I don't think it actually is. I think it's an even crappier sensor, and it just looks just awful. It's an awful camera, and I don't even know why they sell it for more than the micro arrow. So yeah, so the quad in general performs all right, and I know that they're going to have different variations of it, different kind of geometries of it. The quad is fine. But now let's get to the frame. I wouldn't really recommend the quad. The motors and props and the performance is generally okay, but I know that there's better stuff coming. And for $220, you can actually build a real quad with real stuff, not like a fake camera and other fake stuff. But it's not a small price to pay for a quad, and I don't know why it's so expensive. I thought it would be more like $199. But okay, let's move on to the frame. They definitely got a hold of one of my Floss 2 frames, because the dimensions on this frame are pretty much identical in terms of everything. And I'm going to show you here real quick the cosmetics. So this is the previous top plate for the Floss 2. This is the most recent top plate. And the reason why I switched is because this was what the original top plate looked like with these big holes in it. People just said it was ugly, so I made it look like this, and then I also made it with the little punched out holes, but then it was too difficult to manufacture, and like this one has the 2 battery straps, which I realized is really annoying, and we don't need more than one, so I got rid of that, and that's why it has this little bend in the top plate, because I've made it so the battery stays centered, and it has only 1 battery strap side because it's much easier to manage. So they got a version of my Floss 2 that had this waffle pattern on the top, and they pretty much copied that waffle pattern on the top. And when you look at the length of the top plate, it is the same length. It is exactly the same length as my my top plate. What are the chances of that? The spacing is different. They did go down to 27 millimeter. It looks like 27 millimeter spacing. The arm mounting pattern is also within 0.4 of a millimeter of my arm mounting pattern. Now, why would like, how else could they do that unless they had a version of my frame and they were just looking at my frame very, very closely? But the arms are not compatible, unfortunately. I don't know why they wouldn't just make them compatible. Okay, so it looks very similar. It's a Floss 2 mimic. There's tons and tons of them out there. There's about 4 or 5 China copies of the Floss 2. But here's where they kind of screwed up, and this is where I hope to kind of show you guys how much thought and effort goes into frames that are really like a passion project for somebody like me or Tommy with his remix frame. Like, that was really a passion project for him. He spent a long time and put a lot of effort into that frame, lots and lots of testing. But here's where they kind of just fudged up my design and called it their own design, which I'm not upset about because I can't do anything about it. Although I don't like people copying my stuff and I don't appreciate it, at least Diatone went ahead and said, okay, we have been inspired by Bob Ruge, and they put my picture and my name on the product page of this frame, which I do appreciate. It doesn't make it okay, but it at least gives it I'm not like, it's nicer. It's nice of them to do it. Even though I don't like the fact that they're copying, it's nice of them to do it. And they sent me one too, so whatever. All right, so if you look at the design of the top plate of this frame, right here, this little interconnect here is very, very skinny. If you look at the design of my top plate, it's very, very thick. And the reason for that is because when I first started testing this this kind of like single bottom plate and single top plate design, you require the top plate in order to make sure the frame is strong. If you don't have this top plate, the frame is not strong at all. And this is actually the 6-inch version, not the 5-inch version. But the whole setup, when you flex it, it doesn't feel durable unless you have the top plate on. And it's very important that you have those two pieces together. This is something that they clearly did not understand because they just thinned out the top plate. In addition to that, and I'll show you more about why that is in a second. In addition to that, when you look at the bottom plate, the interconnect of the arms to the bottom plate is right here, and it's really narrow. And so my biggest worry when I was designing the frame was that the frame will break right here, and the Floss 1 exhibited that very nicely, and it was very clearly obvious to me where it would break. And so I kept beefing it up, and then I realized that, oh, it's the top plate that's saving the front arms from breaking, and that's why I made it a double top plate, plus I wanted a battery on top. So they made this interconnect really, really skinny, and I'm going to show you the biggest problem with this setup in a second again. And then also take a look at the carbon patterning on the bottom plate. When you look at the carbon patterning against my frame, you see that, and I'm really giving away all the secrets for them how to improve this frame. You see that the carbon patterning on my frame is crosshatch going up and down like this, while this frame, it goes linearly up and down. The reason why I've made it crosshatch up and down is because the plates are cut like this, and that is to give it strength right here where the arm connects to the main body, because I know that that is the weakest point. With a 4mm arm, you still have a super tiny little chance of breaking the main plate. It's never happened, because unless like the screws fell out or something, but it's still a tiny little chance. It still stresses the bottom plate. So I've really optimized this kind of interconnect of the arm to the main body. When you look at the Diatone version of my frame, they have not taken the precaution or the attention to detail to do that, and so you have cross-hatching going down the arm. So now you have a skinny little portion where the arm connects, you have a skinny little portion of where the top plate attaches, and you have poorly oriented carbon fibers, and that makes for, look at this. I'm not even gonna push hard. I can't portray to you how weak this feels, but I could easily snap this frame in my hands without any effort at all. But when I hold my frame, I can really crank on this, and it is really, really durable. It does not feel like it's going to break. This frame is not very confidence inspiring. And that's because they didn't pay attention to that detail. And so I do expect things to start breaking right here in these interconnect regions, or at least there's a pretty good chance of that breaking before the arms break. You're unlikely to break the arms before, well, not unlikely, but you're probably just as likely to break the main plate as you are the arms. And that is totally opposite to what my concept of the Floss frame was. Concept was that the main body plates never break, and all your components and everything is super protected inside, and you have no worries about that. Let's go a step further. Okay, so simple stuff. They totally omitted the arm bumpers, which are very, 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 very effective at saving your motors from hitting stuff. Very effective, and that's why they're used on the Remix frame as well. Tommy recognized that this design of the arm bump just tends to work really well because it kind of protects you from maximally from all sides without adding a whole lot of weight. So that's unfortunate. You will probably ding up motors, and even though it seems kind of random and it seems like it doesn't happen, it actually does happen. You come flying like this, and you kind of bump into the ground, and you bump into things, and it really does hammer the motor. The arms. Look at the arms on this frame. Look how much space there is between the standoff and the arm. It looks like these are, I actually thought it was a 5.5 inch frame. It's not a 5.5 inch frame, it's a 5 inch. When you put a 5.5 inch, it doesn't fit because the arms aren't long enough for this space in the middle. And I know the frame is going to come in different geometries, and that's also the other issue with the frame, which I'll get to in a second as well. But I don't know why they did this to this geometry. They could have shortened the arms, and shorter arms just are less likely to break because you have a less of a torque lever on the arm. The way they've done this, they've made it pretty darn easy to snap the frame when you flex it like this. And so when you look at my frame, my arm geometry is set to one geometry only, and there's only one set of arms for the 5 inch, 6 inch, and I don't think I made 7 inch, but there's a 5 inch and a 5.5 inch and a 6 inch. On the Diatone version, there is a multitude of versions. There's a multitude of sizes and a multitude of geometries, and they all have different arms, or maybe they have the same arms and they just have weird geometries that are unoptimized. And that's, again, not the Floss concept. My whole Floss concept was to minimize the number of parts. Okay, there's more I could say about it, like the hardware. I don't use countersunk hardware because it's not standard. People don't have a box full of countersunk hardware to use, and they don't all have the same countersunk. It's using 10.9 hardness screws, which are not the same hardness as this. This is 12.9. We only use 12.9 hardness. They are not using a lock nut in the center portion of the arm, and I do use a lock nut on mine so that you do have more force to tighten it down. And the arms do wiggle, just like the Floss 2 did, except this is new. It hasn't been bumped or crashed at all, and the arms wiggle pretty badly because of the lack of that lock nut over there. The arms on the Floss 2 do eventually begin to wiggle, but it takes more effort and more crashing and bumping to get them to wiggle. And so there's a couple other things I could say about that. But here is the most recent version of the Floss 2. This is the Floss 2.1. And this is the 6-inch Floss 2, which is kind of more popular for the 5-inch racers, because they just like the wider stance, and it's just kind of standard for them, and they like running 5.5-inch props sometimes as well. And this is 68 grams as seen here, fully built 68 grams. The Floss 2.1 in this version, this is the 5-inch only version, it's 64 grams. It's actually a little bit less than 64. It's like 63.8 grams. 64 grams has this. They have the same top plate, they have the same bottom plate essentially. There's just a minor change where I got rid of the extended portion, because now you will see that the arms are connected. So the arms are one unit, and the arms are 5 millimeters, and it weighs 4 grams less than the 6-inch version, which is the more popular version, which is fantastic to me because I didn't even expect it to weigh that little. The arms are, I'm going to make more videos about this, but the arms were inspired by Corey Yates. They're called C-Train arms for him, and the performance of this frame is really, it's different than the Floss 2, and I'm really surprised that difference that these arms made, being like super solid. And the frame is just, nobody's broken a 5 millimeter version yet, and I have optimized the arm geometry for where it will break on the 4 millimeter version, which I don't know if we're going to offer, but the 4 millimeter version of the arm, people have broken a couple of them, and they break in this area, not right here at the hub, which is what I want. So when I bumped up to 5 millimeters, I'm hoping that even if the arms do break, it doesn't break down at the hub. And so the concept of this frame is that we no longer have much stress on the main plates. And so you could actually dumb plates down to 2 millimeters, but we kept it at 3 millimeters and 2 millimeters on top, just to, give people the confidence of the frame going forward. And you're going to see more about this. I do have 7-inch version of the arms coming, but these are cut from 3 millimeter just because my manufacturer didn't have 5 millimeter at the time, just before the China New Year, and we were just getting some cuts done for sizing purposes to make sure sizing fits for the new frames that are coming out, the Dragana and another frame that's coming. The 3 millimeter is actually pretty strong just because the carbons are running in the correct direction. That's why the arms are 90 degrees to each other. I was really impressed with the 3 millimeter version. I might actually build this in the 7-inch frame because it actually does feel pretty strong. And so that's that. That's enough I'm going to say about that. And this is a quad that I built with the prototype Hyperlight F4. It has the Runcam Micro Eagle in it. It has this TPU mount thing. It has an AXI antenna on it. It has the Hawksky 2207 2400 kV motors, and it has the 5 millimeter arms, and it has my frame. These two frames, the weight difference between these two, 10 grams. My Floss 2.1 weighs 10 grams more with a camera that weighs 4 grams more, like probably 3-4 grams of TPU and 5-6 grams of, or not 5-6, like 4 grams of antenna, which this quad doesn't have. And it has a second battery strap as well, which is another 5 grams as well. So in essence, my quad is it's probably, if you put the same stuff, it's probably 5-6 grams lighter than the Diatone version. I don't know how they managed to do that with these little tiny skinny ESCs and nothing inside. I don't really know. So they ended up with a quad that is a little bit funny and it weighs more with good motors, but it doesn't compare. And the reason why I don't really care about showing this is because the people that are going to buy this are not Hyperlight customers. They're not people that buy Hyperlight frames or race on a regular basis. The Hyperlite brand has become so strong and is so well known for all the work and effort that we put into it. It's definitely not, it's not just me anymore. It's a lot of people. And when I do the actual frame video about the 2.1 and the long range and the other acro frame and the other things that are coming, you're going to see that I'm going to mention a whole lot of people, and there's a lot of pilots that are involved with this. Sean Taylor, Doma FPV, Sergio has a huge part in it. All the guys that work at Pyroflip, me, Corey Yates. There's a lot of input on all the new stuff coming, and we're putting a lot of effort into bringing everybody what they really, really, really want. And it's not just frames. It's like an entire ecosystem that kind of simplifies and makes things more affordable and easier to manage. And so I'm going to tell you that our efforts right now are to make a $199 kind of spec racer with all real parts. And that's the goal right now. We're trying to see if we can meet it. We probably will. We will have a 6S top spec racer version and a 4S regular spec racer or value option, because we do foresee everybody eventually moving to 6S because we make all the parts, a lot of the parts ourselves. We can offer really good deals and really good values, and we only use top high-end components and high-end stuff. So I'm really looking forward to that. We are working really hard on that. We have 2 new people that Pyroflip has hired that we are working on this stuff, and there's a lot of stuff coming. It's just the Chinese New Year that has really slowed everything down. That's it for now. Don't forget to floss, and I hope that it gave you a little bit of insight as to the thought process that goes into these things.